Hey, how's everyone doing? Guys okay? Was the coffee okay? Admittedly, I would prefer tea, but the tea ran out. Because I think that's like 4 cups worth of coffee in me now. Okay, right, so I think just a bit preface. Yep, okay. Green. Yeah, because unfortunately, due to the design of the window, we have to go with a different design, which is something like this. Great. Okay, so the title, yes, I know we just had lunch. It's called Char Teow and Stir Fry Cooking in Graphic Design. Later at the end of it, you know how to cook char kway teow. It's a very nice dish if you come down to this part of Malaysia. Okay, so first things first, let's have a look at what we are settling with. So this is part in this very lovely place called Georgetown in Penang. This place called Komtar. And but unfortunately, before Komtar, this huge thing, there was this very historic quarters that sits along Penang Road. So that's Penang Road, and then that's Magazine. And so there's just a lot of shop lots. But unfortunately, since and before that, that's Georgetown right up there. Samuel has lovely, and it's a lovely Samuel's just shown you. Singapore's right down there, so just kind of like right up there in Georgetown. But this part of Georgetown, this old part, was kind of getting in this state of dilapidation because since the British had left Malaya in the 50s, Penang's free port status, which was maintained from the British era, which has kind of got this really which has allowed Penang to prosper, has unfortunately led Georgetown to decay, and a lot of shop lots are also kind of turned into slums. So in the 60s, the Penang government then formed the Penang Development Corporation, and one of their key projects was to create Komtar. So that's Complex Tunku Abdul Rahman, which was named after our former Prime Minister. And so you can kind of see that little pencil tower. If you've seen the maps, it looks kind of familiar, yeah? Right? So, and interestingly, at the bottom of it, there will be a new city bus terminal, or bus interchange, as I like to call it. Both works, right? Okay, but there are some issues, right, which unfortunately has been carried on from successive phases of this particular project. Namely, one is that if you look from, so there are lots of sky bridges above that connects between the various buildings, which looks great if you're from those sky bridges, but when you're on the ground, there's very little signages, very little wayfinding to actually bring you around the different buildings, and they all kind of tower very tall. It's not like Hong Kong where you can kind of walk around and with ease because most things are well signed. Unfortunately, not the case for most of the roads within Komtar. And when you're in the bus interchange, and you can kind of see there's like very little way of telling where your bus is until you look at those screens, but sometimes they don't work. And it was a big issue earlier this year because the screens had a massive outage that lasted a month, and a lot of people kind of have no idea where the buses are. And they have to rely on the screens to see which berth, which platform they have to board their buses from. And last but not least, there is a map of the area, but it looks kind of something that was quickly cobbled up. So the one above is the old one, and the one below is the new one that was pasted, I think, 2 years back. And it looks kind of the same. It's like they open up the same PowerPoint file, edit it, and voila, right? So let me just quickly go through this very quickly. As you can see, I think everyone here has probably a mind smarter than me. You can kind of tell, yeah, okay, this is not great. As you can see, some of the icons a bit too large, especially when you want to tell, like, okay, where am I, right? And looking at this, it's kind of hard to tell exactly where you are because you're actually, you're actually at Komtar bus terminal, that red line thing, but that thing is smaller compared to that temple icon at the bottom right. A lot of things kind of like out of sight, out of scale, out of place. And it's unhelpful to also show attractions that also have Komtar because the ones outside is a more interesting part. Okay. And I was actually looking through my photo galleries for this slide, and I just realized there's actually a better map that sits at the entrance of Komtar into the bus terminal, but there was only like 2 of these and the entirety of the complex, which is very, very odd. Okay. So, yep. And on top of that, there's also other forms of wayfinding. So this one, the one on the top, that's within the complex. So that is how you can navigate within complex. But keep in mind, Komtar is actually a complexes of multiple structures, multiple buildings that are connected with sky bridges and also on the ground. But look at that, you only see very unhelpfully places within Komtar, but not anywhere like the hotel next door or the malls next door. It tells you, oh, go downstairs for the bus, go upstairs for the government offices, and that's it. And then there's also the free city bus that kind of loops around. But again, this only is placed at a bus stop, even if you know where to find a particular bus stop. Okay, right. So now let's start talking about my little spite for this place and how I kind of turned that into something of a solution. Okay, so of course, you first have to really start with kind of walking around, kind of get a sense of where exactly you're working with, and if you've seen what I've created, you also notice that a lot of the models is actually based off from the modeling of the buildings. Unfortunately, there's no public 3D data of buildings, so you kind of have to derive based on guesswork and literally visiting the place. And last but not least, OSM, always a great resource to kind of get like a nice base map. And this was what was conceived. And in fact, you can view a poster. It's just to your left, right? And it's kind of like a lot of things happening at once. So let's try to break it down, right? So first you have the main buildings, and I think the one that would really stand out the most is that Pencil Tower, that's Comta, that's the main complex right there. So a lot of people will kind of orient themselves around Comta, the building itself, and then say, that's the funny Pencil Tower, that means I'm at the right place. Everything else is kind of, you don't read that much detail to it because it's not really that interesting, right? But there's also labels on top, so you kind of see like what buildings are and stuff like that. And then okay. And then you also have the roads that corresponds to where the buildings are. You can also see the labels as well. Now the interesting part, in part for Penang, if you go a bit closer to the road, to the maps later on, you notice for the Mandarin, there's actually two names to it because there's a name for the Hokkien. There's a variant in Hokkien for those roads, so that's what the locals would use. And then there's also the Mandarin of what people, if you speak in standard Mandarin, you use that. So the different ethnic groups, the ethnic Chinese groups, will have their own different names for the streets. So that's also kind of included as well, which gets quite unruly long depending on how you see it. And then there's also the bus information, and they're also color coded depending on where you are. So you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at the bottom, down there, that sprouts out. That's from the bus terminal, the bus interchange. And then the one that kind of sprouts out from the top, that's from the other bus stops around the vicinity of the area. So, for example, the one to the most left, the turquoise one, that one leads back towards the jetty to go back towards the mainland. And then there's also the free city bus, kind of sits on its own. And then there's also the other one that not a lot of people would use, which is kind of right outside along Cross Street. Okay, and then there's also other few helpful bus information. So, for example, a destination guide that tells people, you want to go to Penang Hill, then you just take 204, and 204 is green. You go to green, and green is number 2. You find number 2. And then at the same time, let's say you want to buy a bus pass, then there's this very big arrow that kind of points you down to that orange structure there. That's actually where the bus office is, the bus ticket office is. But again, not a lot of people know that's kind of sitting there unless you walk around in circles for 10 minutes. And also, not a lot of people know that you cannot use bank cards or our contactless card. The equivalent to the octopus here would be Touch and Go Malaysia, and you can't use that for the buses in Penang. So, kind of just put it there. If you can't be bothered to read it, the icons kind of work. And also a fare table at the top. So, and then last but not least, where are you? There it is, right there. Long one, big one right there. And this also, of course, changes depending on where you see the poster. Last but not least, let's go back. Go back. Yep. Okay, just slightly bonus. Everything, so everything's kind of modeled that way. It's all hand-drawn. Like I said, there's no public 3D data model for the building, so again, you have to derive everything on your own. And this is just some experimental designs of how I wanted to do the flags before I dropped it and decided to just make it straight instead, so it makes it easier to read. And at the same time, go back. Okay. At the same time, because it's all color coded, so depending on where you are, the poster, the colors will also change depending on where you are, right? So, like for example, you see blue, that means you're here, and if you see green, that means you're on berth 2, so on and so forth. I don't have really good photo of like all of the posters in one row because it's a very big bus terminal. Okay, and last but not least, there are quite some interesting demographics that have used the posters as well. So the second one's the most interesting one. Like the moment I pasted it and I walked around, to my back, oh, there's like tourists using it. Fantastic, right? And Then the third one, one of my favorite ones, is where you have the auxiliary police also using it, thinking it was official, and I think helping out the tourists as well is to the left. Yeah, it's kind of cropped out. But yeah, it was quite nice seeing like the work they've done literally seconds after, and people just started using it because the wayfinding there is absolutely terrible. Okay, and next. Yeah. So, what's the major takeaway from this, right? So, the next. Yeah. So, with your will and determination, especially for people who are really trying to start out, I understand most of you guys are professionals here, but I think there's also a fair bit amount of people who are also well determined to fix something in the local community. Just do it, right? If you think there's something wrong in the community, something you think that utterly needs to be fixed, just do it, right? Because I think in many ways, more than one, the best way to see change is to literally be the change. And at the same time, as for if you work for a transit agency or a transport operator, I think there's also really good value in seeing interventions by a community because the story with this is that the poster on the right was pasted a year ago, and you can see how it's very worn out to a point that the adhesives actually has kind of like has failed, and someone actually taped. That was not my tape. Like the tape up there was from someone else, right? And the one to the left is the new one that I've kind of replaced it because I wanted to kind of give it a nice like refresh. But I think the biggest thing is that transit agencies should definitely try to look out for people who are very well enthusiastic in the local community as well to try to implement like these quick fixes, right? Because if there are people out there literally doing the work for you, I think it's also a very good opportunity to also approach them and understand like, hey, you know, like let's work something together. So at the same time, this is kind of like what I'm trying to experiment with at the moment. Okay, next one. And also one last thing, just very quickly. There was a Twitter mutual friend of mine up there who mentioned, unfortunately, that most of the posters were removed during I think last year when they did a renovation. So, but yeah, you can also see that there are people who do value this kind of interventions as well, and you wouldn't even know it, right? Okay. Last but not least, what could have been better? I think the largest limitation I had was budget, so I could only print so many posters with my limited budget at a given time. Because if I had more money, I would definitely would love to fix up all of the wayfinding, create more, like much better wayfinding around the area rather than just 6, 7 posters. At the same time, the material could also be better sourced because I only printed this on laminated paper. And if I had, I think, more money as well, I think definitely something more permanent would be great. And the next thing is that Penang will also get its own metro very soon. So there might be renewed interest in wayfinding for the area. Now the question is, how would it be integrated into the area? Is the metro even thinking about wayfinding in that particular area towards Komta as well? That remains to be seen since the metro is breaking ground this year. So we'll see. Okay, and I think just something a bit more of a fun side, I've also tried to sort of experiment what it would be like to have a kind of like mobile display, kind of sits in your pocket, like a mobile pager. You're gonna have it static, sitting there, on the go. And the one thing to realize is that a lot of people, because I'm from Kuala Lumpur, the capital, and we don't actually have a lot of digital displays like that sitting at the bus stops that actually works. So oftentimes people have to rely on their phones and stuff like that. But the thing is, the phone is a barrier in itself because not everyone has a phone or a phone that could connect to the internet. So a lot of times you do often see people trying to look. So there are some bus stops in Kuala Lumpur where they do have the digital displays, but actually not working. They show like 99 minutes, and people still think, oh wow, the bus is arriving in 99 minutes. But no, it's just outdated data. Okay, and then just very quickly, just to kind of get the genesis of where I really came from. So a lot of it was just really out of spite, really. Just trying to fix up, I think, simple fixes on the network. Because 2 years back, there was this major disruption that kind of killed off a very good chunk of our metro. And the transit operator said, okay, we'll fix this in 2 weeks. 2 weeks becomes 2 months, and 2 months becomes 4 months, so on and so forth, right? And it could be something that could just be a simple sticker to fix up, tell people, say, hey, you know, you might have delays because there's no trains running in this sector, but the transit operator say, no, it's okay, it's a temporary fix. But it's like, you know what, temporary fix, we can do that too. So we start off with inkjet paper. So that's Daniel's. That's Daniel's hands right there, courtesy of him. It's right at the back, helping me out to stick those lovely stickers. Just quickly fix right these information gaps in our transit maps. And this is kind of where we are right now. So this is something very recently that we've worked with Transport for Jakarta to implement a much better bus stop, because a lot of bus stops right now simply look like one big shelter, right? I think you've seen the presentations as well. It's plain shelter and there's nothing to it. And this is a pilot at the moment. So we're experimenting with this bus stop that's near my studio in Kuala Lumpur. Well, hopefully this is a design system that could be expanded, that could be played around with the community, because this is also a fairly modular design that you can extend and also shrink if needed, really. Because again, a lot of, it's a very modular design, so the community can also come in and also do their own maps at the same time. But yeah, and I think very, very quick takeaway that always stuck in my head is this quote by Donald Norman. It always says along this, that good design it always fits in unnoticed, but bad design sticks out like a really, really sore thumb. Right. Okay. Have you guys noticed there's an Easter egg in all these slides? No. Have you guys noticed the top right? Ah. And now we have cooked up Char Kway Teow, mixing all the design elements into one. And this is a lovely stir-fried noodle dish you can get in Penang. Please do come to Penang, see my maps, or have really good food. And this is where you can get it if you like. And you can also follow me on Ernest on PT. And yeah, that'll be all. Thank you very much.